Good evening. You're watching ARIRANG News at 8. It's Monday, January 27th here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I am Yoo Ji-han. We begin this evening with a possible sign of easing tensions on the Korean peninsula. South Korea has proposed a date for reunions of families separated by the Korean War, throwing back the ball back in North Korea's court. While hopes are high of the much-anticipated event taking place, there are also looming concerns that the upcoming Seoul-Washington joint military exercises could be a major hurdle. Hwang Sung-hee reports.
Families separated since the Korean War will have the chance to see each other again in mid-February if North Korea agrees to South Korea's offer made on Monday.
Considering the wishes of the separated families, we propose holding a round of family reunions at the Mount Kumgangsan resort from February 17th to the 22nd for 6 days.
This follows Pyongyang's surprise proposal on Friday that the reunions resume at a convenient time for Seoul after the Lunar New Year holiday, which falls at the end of this week. South Korea's Unification Ministry said the proposed dates are flexible and asked to hold working-level talks on Wednesday at the truce village of Panmunjom to fine-tune the details. Pyongyang may want a later date, sometime after the joint military drills between Seoul and Washington, which begin at the end of February. Despite North Korea's repeated calls to cancel what it views as war games, South Korea made clear that the humanitarian event and the military training exercises are two separate matters.
When we selected the date, we considered the preparation process at Mount Kumgang and the urgency of holding family reunions. The joint military drills between South Korea and the U.S. were not considered.
Millions of Koreans were separated from their loved ones when the country was divided more than 6 decades ago. Around 72,000 South Koreans are on a waiting list for a chance to meet their families one last time. But it's been 3 years now since the last reunions. If the event takes place next month, 100 divided family members from each side who were selected for last year's canceled reunions will meet with their loved ones. However, a handful of these aging relatives have fallen ill since then, underscoring the urgency of resuming the long-suspended reunions. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
The U.S. envoy on North Korea has called on Pyongyang to take more meaningful steps toward peaceful reconciliation. Talking to reporters in Beijing on Sunday, U.S. Special Representative on North Korea Policy Glenn Davies said that Pyongyang's most important task is going beyond its recent charm offensive, which includes a proposal for reunions for families separated since the Korean War. Davies said he can't nail down the reasons for the North's recent actions, but said this is not the first time Pyongyang has shown an interest in improving inter-Korean ties. The U.S. envoy will meet with his Chinese counterpart, Woo Da-wei, and other high-ranking officials in Beijing until Tuesday before heading to Seoul and then Tokyo. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani says he would be willing to play the role of mediator for difficult inter-Korean issues, including North Korea's nuclear program. President Rouhani made the remarks during a meeting with South Korean National Assembly Speaker Kang Chang-hee, who arrived in Tehran on Sunday to hold talks with senior Iranian officials. According to Kang's spokesman, Rouhani added that Tehran would be able to help resolve Pyongyang's nuclear issue, given Iran's experiences in dealing with Western powers over the issue. And as the dust settles on one of the largest ever personal and financial data leaks in Korean history, the country's main political parties have been rolling out their own measures to investigate the matter. They include banning all spam messages and voice phishing by the year's end. Our Kim Young-gil has more.
In the wake of the massive data leak, Korea's National Assembly plans to pass a revision to the Personal Information Protection Act at next month's extraordinary session. The revision will form a legal framework to make mobile spam messages illegal and clamp down on voice phishing, both of which are the most common forms of financial fraud. Financial firms will also be restricted from sharing their clients' personal information with their affiliates to prevent secondary damages. The leader of the main opposition Democratic Party, Kim Han-gil, has proposed the National Assembly form a special committee to find out how the data breaches were able to happen. Kim is also demanding government and presidential office officials step down to take responsibility for the leaks.
There should be a full-scale personnel shakeup at the presidential office of Cheongwade and the cabinet, as these leaks were brought on by President Park Geun-hye's uncommunicative politics.
He also urged the ruling Saenuri Party to accept his party's proposal of setting up a special committee to oversee a parliamentary probe into the matter. Kim said the government must determine the causes of the leaks and come up with preventive measures. However, the Saenuri Party says it's opposed to Kim's proposal, as the matter can be handled by one of the National Assembly's standing committees.
A separate parliamentary probe by a special committee is unnecessary. Our top priority is to bring the situation under control. President Park has promised to hold people accountable.
At an emergency meeting with related ministers on Sunday, Prime Minister Chung Hong-won ordered the establishment of a government-wide task force and to devise follow-up measures to bring the crisis under control. Kim Young-gil, ARIRANG News.
Now, count President Park Geun-hye among those up in arms about the recent theft and leak of personal data. The president didn't mince words on Monday, saying she would personally see to it that anyone who is proven to have been involved is held responsible. Our presidential office correspondent, Oh Jin-joo, has this report.
President Park is firm about holding those involved in the massive data leak of 20 million bank and credit card users responsible.
이번에 문제가 된 3개 카드사 이외에 다른 회사에서는 개인정보 유출이 없었는지 전 금융회사를 대상으로 철저히 조사를 하고.
Meeting with her top secretaries on Monday, the president described the leak as, quote, something that should have never happened, and ordered officials to devise measures to ensure that customers do not suffer when financial firms collect and store personal data. She also urged those firms to find other ways to identify individuals rather than relying solely on resident registration numbers, which are widely used in Korea. Other options, she says, could include the use of driver's license numbers. President Park also slammed Deputy Prime Minister Hyun Oh-seok's controversial remarks last week on the data leak, saying they only increase distrust among the public. Hyun faced strong backlash from the public and politicians after saying that, quote, foolish people always try to put the blame on others when something happens, and don't we all agree with financial firms when we provide personal information? The comments came in response to questions on whether the heads of the nation's financial watchdogs will resign over the incident.
앞으로 공직자 모두가 정말 국민을 위하고 존중하는 마음으로 임해주기를 바라면서 이런 일이 재발할 시에는 그 책임을 반드시 물을 것입니다.
President Park called for a swift passage of a bill on financial consumer protection at a provisional session of the National Assembly in February to prevent similar crises from happening again. Oh Jin-joo, ARIRANG News.
It's been a week and a half since a bird flu outbreak in the country took hold, and authorities are still trying to put a lid on its spread. The government locked down 3 provinces on Monday in an effort to stave off its effects, but the virus continues to creep closer and closer to the capital, Seoul. Shin Se-min has more.
An emergency quarantine lockdown to prevent the spread of the bird flu in the country was lifted on Monday evening. Disease prevention authorities put 3 provinces in lockdown for 12 hours on Monday while they sterilized all potential sources of avian influenza. That also included prohibiting the movement of animals, people, and vehicles from farms. However, despite these efforts, a suspected bird flu case was reported in Chungcheongbuk-do province, the first in the central province since the first AI case was confirmed on January 16th. A total of 14 ducks have died at a farm in the province since yesterday. The recent discovery is the most northern point that the virus has been detected, increasing worries that it could spread to the Seoul metropolitan area. The highly pathogenic A5N8 strain was confirmed in more ducks over the weekend, including on a farm in Korea's southern Jeollanam-do province. Fanning fears is that AI was found in chickens for the first time in Buyeo, Chungcheongnam-do province. That is especially concerning to authorities because chickens are more vulnerable to the virus and greatly outnumber ducks in the country. So far, more than 500,000 birds have been culled, with another 2.2 million expected to be slaughtered over the coming days. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
Millions of people die each year of tobacco-related diseases, but it's not easy to prove that cigarette smoking was the sole reason for their deaths. Now, here in the country, 4 lawsuits have been filed against tobacco manufacturers so far, all by individuals, but none have won yet. But they may change. Last Friday, the National Health Insurance Service, a Korean public agency, filed a suit against tobacco companies at home and abroad, asking for up to $300 million in damages. For more on the tobacco lawsuit on the horizon, we go one-on-one with Dr. Hwang Sung-hee, professor of law at Yonsei University. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me here again.
Right. This is the first time a state-run agency has filed an anti-smoking lawsuit.
Yes.
Tell us how it came to the decision to sue tobacco companies in the first place.
Well, there's a law which is called National Health Insurance Act, and reportedly last year and in the year of 2011, 1.1 trillion more health cost was incurred from the smoking habits. Mm-hmm. And then now NHLI says that they have a very strong proof that smoking habits and the incurring disease are closely related, even in legal terms. And in the year 2012, 43.2 billion won was spent additionally for smoke-related diseases. So under the National Health Insurance Act, NHLI health insurance had the power to seek damages from an external party for increased expenses for healthcare reasons. And now I understand it is seeking about damages to recover medical costs, about 333 billion Korean won in damages.
Is that a lot?
Yeah, that's quite a lot.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, on what legal grounds is the public agency trying to pursue this legal battles against tobacco companies?
Well, just as you mentioned before, the individual plaintiffs have filed lawsuits without much fruit. And then one of the big legal reasons that they have had to fail was that they had to prove there's a strong relation between they did bear the burden of proof for proving that there's strong relation between smoking habits and related to diseases, and also they had to somehow prove that cigarette companies had knowingly or intentionally withheld from healthcare informations. And then they were engaging in sort of fraudulent commercial activities as well. But those things were very difficult for individual plaintiffs to prove. But now this time, this is a health insurance agency, and they are not the smokers, and they are asking for the increased amounts of healthcare cost they causes from the commercial activities of tobacco companies. And last year, a high court in this country has confirmed that at least 2 types of cancers have very strong link and a causal link with the smoking habits. So, and also the health insurance says that they have accumulated about medical data of about over 1.3 million people. And then they have a very strong proof and empirical proof that smoking and the diseases are closely interlinked.
It certainly seems like they have a strong case here. But how about the tobacco companies? Do they have a strong counter arguments?
Well, they come up with a lot of different arguments. First, in the individual cases, they put forward arguments such as these individual plaintiffs had contributed to the origination of the diseases because of their smoking habits, or they even said there's no causal link between smoking and the diseases as well, because other factors in life also may contribute to the birth of the diseases as well. And but this time they say, if you count on 25 years until the year 2002, the Korean government was actually in charge of these tobacco businesses. So they are actually dragging the Korean government into holding responsibility with them. And also, they also want that inevitably this type of losses will result in the increase of the price of the cigarettes, which will also cause the social problems as well. So these are the sort of social, legal, and emotional arguments that are put forward by the tobacco industry.
And we have seen similar types of tobacco lawsuits in other countries, including the United States, France, and Israel. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, United States is a king. It has a lion's share in these types of litigations. The litigation in the United States began in 1950s, actually. And just like in this country. And at first stage, individual plaintiffs have failed. But second, from the time of mid-1990s, states have begun to file lawsuits for the increase in the healthcare cost against the major smoking companies. And then what I understand is that the smoking companies and the over 50 states have actually made a eventual deal, which is called the Tobacco Master Settlement Agreement, under which that the tobacco companies would pay about $2.6 million for the 25 years. And same things are happening in Canada as well. Canada has a Healthcare Recovery Act, under which the federal government and provincial governments can officially file lawsuits against tobacco companies for healthcare cost increase. And there was also, they had a Canadian type of settlement between companies and in other, Finland or Israel, in this country, Korea, a lot of litigations are going on. So it's a hot debate, and somehow, this is a momentum. So everybody has to, have a wisdom to come up with a better solution than before.
I mean, there's no set date, but what is your outlook on a possible tobacco lawsuit in Korea?
Well, it is hard to predict because this is a very beginning period. And just as the tobacco companies are saying that Korean government has to have some part of the responsibility as well. And inevitably, the increase in the cigarettes prices will result. And but that will somehow result in the decrease in the cigarette consumption as well. And also there is a people, anti-smoking Citizens Alliance people, and they have also have a role to play here. And the court, there's a strong expectation that from this time on, courts may have more forward-looking vision and attitude about how to deal with these types of cases as well. So I think this is time to speak on it.
Certainly. Okay, Professor Hwang, thank you very much for joining us this evening.
My pleasure.
Touch base with journalists, experts, and analysts who are taking the pulse of Asia's heartbeat.
South Korea's defense minister.
In a lively half hour, join ARIRANG's Yoo Ji-hye for the day's top stories, current affairs, business, technology trends, plus global weather forecasts and more. ARIRANG News. Every weeknight, live on ARIRANG TV.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has no intention of backtracking from the controversial remarks he made last week on the current state of relations between Japan and China. This while the new head of Japan's public broadcaster, NHK, now finds himself under fire for seemingly defending Japan's use of military sex slaves during World War II. Kim Hyun-ji reports.
Controversial remarks by NHK's new president, Katsutomo Mii, are being met with heavy criticism. At his inaugural news conference on Saturday, Mii said that women have been used as sex slaves by the militaries of many countries throughout history, not just Japan. He also criticized Korea for continuing to demand that Tokyo compensate Korean victims of sexual enslavement by the Japanese military during World War II. Japan argues the issue had been settled by a bilateral peace treaty. According to Japan's Asahi Shimbun, a high-ranking executive of the ruling Liberal Democratic Party said that Mii's comfort women remarks could lead to his dismissal as NHK chairman. Observers say this also is likely to affect the Japanese parliament's budget deliberations for NHK, which are due to start in March. Mo-mi must stand before the House of Representatives when those deliberations start, and several opposition members of parliament have expressed their intent to grill him when they do. Meanwhile, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe continues to defend his likening of current Japan-China relations to those of Britain and Germany before World War I, saying that there was nothing inappropriate about what he said. While in Davos last week, Abe explained that Britain and Germany, like Japan and China today, had a strong trading relationship. Although the strategic bilateral relations did not stop the two countries from going to war in 1914. Japan has denied that Abe's comments were intended to suggest that war is inevitable, and China's foreign ministry has responded by calling the remarks inappropriate. Some say Japan's central role in the heightened tensions in Northeast Asia may play a major role in U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry's decision over whether to visit Tokyo when he comes to the region next month. Kim Hyun-ji, ARIRANG News.
Concerns over the weakening global economic recovery took a big bite out of Korea's benchmark index on Monday. In fact, Asian stocks across the board started off the week in decline. Kim Ji-yeon has the details.
The sell-off in global markets turned toward Asia on Monday, with stocks across the region plunging and trading as worries grow over slowing growth in China and signs that the U.S. will ease back on stimulus measures. Shares in Seoul slumped to a 5-month low to start the week. The benchmark Kospi dropped 1.5% to close at 1910 after dipping as low as 1899 at one point, its lowest level since August last year. Indexes in other countries met similar fates. The MSCI Asia Pacific Index dropped 1.5% to a 4.5-month low, while Japan's Nikkei dropped 2.5% to 15,000, the lowest closing level since mid-November, as the yen touched a 7-week high against the greenback. The declines first hit developing economies, with the currencies in Argentina, Turkey, and South Africa depreciating to new levels not seen in years. Experts attribute the sell-off from investors growing wary of tightening credit conditions in China as Beijing seeks to curb growth. The capital flight is also being fueled by expectations that the U.S. Federal Reserve will decide to taper an additional $10 billion off their bond buying programs during their 2-day policy meeting that begins on Tuesday. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
And it looks like world's tech giants Samsung Electronics and Google will be partners for the next 10 years. The two sides agreed on a global patent cross-licensing agreement that will allow them to share existing and future patents. Our Yoo Di-an reports.
Samsung Electronics and Google, which are frequently involved in patent infringement lawsuits but not against each other, have agreed to share their existing patents and those filed over the next 10 years. Without providing details, the two companies emphasized the deal will help them better avoid litigation. The head of Samsung's Intellectual Property Center, Ahn Seung-ho, said in a press release that Samsung and Google are showing the rest of the industry that there is more to gain from cooperating than engaging in unnecessary patent disputes. The sentiment was echoed by Google's Deputy General Counsel for Patents, Alan Lowe, who said through agreements like this, companies can reduce the potential for litigation and focus instead on innovation. The comment appeared to have been a direct shot at Apple, with which the two companies have been engaged in a number of multinational patent battles. Samsung is the second largest patent holder in the United States, and Google is the 11th, and the deal is expected to give both an edge in upcoming patent battles. For Google, pundits say the deal has broad implications considering its growing reach into hardware and wearables. With Samsung's hardware patents, Google can more easily expand into the wearable industry. Samsung, which seemed like it was trying to break away from Google's Android platform to develop a mobile platform of its own, will continue to work with Google in that realm. Looking ahead, the deal is also expected to lead to deeper collaboration on research and development of future projects. Yoo Di-an, ARIRANG News.
And let's go over to our Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center. Now, Bo-kyung, it felt more like early spring than winter in the capital today, but I hear we shouldn't get too used to the pleasant weather.
That's right, Ji-hye. There looks to be light passing snow showers in the central regions tomorrow morning, so it would be a good idea to keep an umbrella handy. Moving on to our current conditions, the central regions are at the edge of a high pressure system from the West Sea. Well, so tomorrow there looks to be rain, but things will clear up in the afternoon and temperatures will continue to remain above the seasonal average range. Other than that, on and off showers are forecast over the Lunar New Year holiday. On Thursday, which is the first day of the holiday, it will be drizzly in most parts of the country. However, we should be able to see clear skies on the day of the Lunar New Year, which is Friday. Taking a closer look at tomorrow's readings, Seoul starts off the day at 0 degrees with a high of 4. Meanwhile, Daegu and Busan hit the low teens. Moving on to other regions, Jeju makes it to 11 degrees, while Dokdo and Mount Kumgang peak at 8 and -2 degrees, respectively. Well, that's all for now, and back to you, Ji-hye.
Thanks, Bo-kyung. And that's a broadcast on this Monday evening. I'm Yoo Ji-hye in Seoul. Thanks for watching.